This is Between Realms and Reason, bridging the inner and outer cosmos, one conversation at a time. Here's your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Reality, as we've known it, is unraveling. Consensus truths are dissolving, guideposts are vanishing, and the old structures are collapsing. But, according to Judith Corvin-Blackburn, this chaos is not the end, it's the initiation. Her new book, The 6D Ascension Journey, Debating the Light Codes in Our 12-Strand DNA, invites us to step beyond the limits of 3D and 4D consciousness into the higher frequencies encoded in our very DNA. A psychotherapist, shamanic minister, and teacher of multidimensional awareness, Judith believes we're designed to be 5D/6D humans, creators of a joyful, just, and loving reality. Judith Corvin-Blackburn joins me now to explore how awakening our star DNA, reclaiming our car body, and activating the light codes of our soul can guide us through this turbulent transition into the new human we were always meant to become. Judith Corvin-Blackburn, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's great to be here.
So you call this book the 6D Ascension Journey. Why is the sixth dimension so crucial at this stage of human evolution?
Well, more and more teachers have been teaching about the fifth dimension, which is what my prior book, Activating Our 5D Frequency, really focused on. Because it's a little complex, but we're going from being third dimensional physical humans to higher frequencies that are primarily fifth dimensional. And the main qualities of that are being unconditionally loving to self and others, unity consciousness, understanding that everything is interconnected, unbridled creativity. And that puts us in a place of releasing judgment and really being able to see the big picture. Where the sixth dimension comes in, and again, this is using a theory that I love that Barbara Hand-Cloud brought in to modern consciousness. It's actually been taught here. There's some indication. You have to kind of look at a little tiny footnote in Barbara's the first round of Alchemy of Nine Dimensions that Plato actually taught. I can't remember if it was Plato or it was the Hellenic. It must have been Plato was actually teaching this in a mystery school. And we can go back to very ancient Egypt prior to the pharaohs, where they were really using Atlantean energy and teaching this model. So that said, in this model, let me say it this way, whether the people out there teaching this use that particular model or not, because there are different lenses to look at this, and I think they all serve a positive purpose, there's pretty much agreement. Nobody was talking about the sixth dimension, and the sixth dimension is the quantum field. It is what Plato called the world of forms, where everything that we can imagine, think, envision exists. It's like, from what I understand, Native American elders often called it the field of plenty. It holds everything. And if I get a creative idea based on, everything we've already learned or know, it pops into that field as well. So our whole reality is available from making choices of what we bring in from that sixth dimensional field.
So would you liken that to Rupert Sheldrake's morphic field?
Yes. I'm not an expert on the physics of it, but the morphic field absolutely is part of this. So, what Sheldrake was able to do with the 100th monkey and how we actually transmit information, not just humans, but animals do this as well. There's a whole energy field or quantum field probably, right? Where we are already exchanging information so that when, the 100th monkey piece was the monkeys on 2 different islands, and one, I can't remember specifically what they learned, but they developed some sort of tool to get their food more easily. And then all of a sudden, this island that was not connected, the monkeys started doing the same thing. I think it's very similar to Jung's collective unconscious.
Yeah. I mean, some people talk about the other dimensions as, just places of states of being. It's where your consciousness is and how you move through the world as it is in that dimension. Is that correct? So it is a state of, it's not a place, it's a state of being.
That works for me. I think so. Right. I think that's a really important way to look at it, because part of the way we really activate that in ourselves is our inner state of being. This is an inside job to go through this ascension process in a way that we stay sane and that we're humans. We're going to go back and forth. We're not going to do this linearly. We're not going to always be successful doing it, but we have tools to keep bringing ourselves into that higher frequency, which is very much connected with the heart. It's very much, and this is very 5th dimensional, about opening our hearts, following our hearts, understanding the wisdom of our hearts. And that's, the heart's a place, but it's not like I'm going to get on the ship and go someplace and land in the 5th or 6th dimension.
You talk about star DNA and dormant strands. What does that mean in practical terms? And, are these things that can only be activated when we've reached that way of being, that lens, of looking at the world and behaving accordingly?
Best we can. I want to stress that, because I do think people when they understand these concepts, they then put a lot of pressure on themselves, thinking they should be able to be there all the time. Not possible yet. Perhaps, hopefully we're evolving. We can be there more frequently in that experience. And now I forgot your question. I'm sorry.
The star DNA and the dormant strands, what do they actually mean in practical terms?
Okay. Well, first, in terms of how I envision the star DNA, it is literally those 10 DNA strands that scientists traditionally call junk because they couldn't find out what it did. And of course, that makes no sense. You don't have 10 out of 12 strands that are useless. As we're becoming more developed, as we're expanding our perceptual field to understand this better, the star DNA means we have all these gifts that have been dormant. A lot of it is telepathy. Really tuning into interconnections with everything. There's a beautiful man who he recently passed. He was an African shaman called Credo Mutwa. And he talked about his people. I'm trying to remember the tribe. It was Zulu, and one of the and Bushmen. Was his heritage. How did he say this? They could see the spheres moving and hear the heavenly spheres. They had developed physically to such a larger extent. We've been shutting that all down by shutting that DNA down. So as we're reopening this, all sorts of gifts come through. I think the one that's most common for people is empathy, and the really becoming more and more empathic, which is a wonderful thing. However, it's not always easy to handle when you can't tell what's yours and what's somebody else's. Nonetheless, as we learn to handle that, we really, I'll give you an example, because, time is changing as well. Well, I'm not an expert on that one, but one of the pieces that I imagine is that as we develop this, for instance, you and I had an appointment today and it was at a specific point in linear time. We won't need to do that because we would just intuitively know time to come together because we'd be communicating from a different level. So, where that takes us, we'll see.
So, it sounds very complicated to people, all these different dimensions and you've got to, reach a certain state of consciousness. And probably many people think they have reached that state of consciousness and they probably haven't, because they're not really sure, what is the proof? What is the evidence of that? How would they know when they've reached it? Is it that just suddenly their ideas have changed? Is it that, they find that they have access to things that they didn't have access before?
Well, yes, I think that's opening more and more and more. And it would be very unlikely somebody's at the end of that. We're really, from my perspective, very much at the very beginning. So as people are opening to this, they may feel they've already hit the end, but, and they've already got all of it. But that would be highly unusual, let's say, and unlikely. So it's a process. And that's what I really stress in this book. We are in a process. We have historically, if you look at Atlantis and Lemuria, and then the great star nations, we have historically help. We have some models, but they're not very evident. We have to kind of hunt for them to be able to have a sense of where we're going, what that's going to look like and feel like, which is really important.
You mentioned the word empathy. That's an interesting one because certainly on my news feed, there's been a lot of talk about MAGA supporters, fundamentalist Christians, really not liking that word at all. Now, in the context that you've brought that word, into the conversation, one would go, aha, there's a good reason then why they're doing that, because they're trying to, they want people not to have access to all of those gifts. I mean, do you, which opens up another load of questions, who is telling them that? Or are they just knee-jerk in some way that they understand what they don't want us to have?
Yeah, those are really tricky areas.
Yeah.
It does seem there's intent behind this to hold people back, and people that are pretty unsuspecting. It's sort of amazing to me why somebody wouldn't want empathy, right? Or to live in a world where we can't feel and our interconnectedness with everybody and understand just because we don't have a primary journey of like this other person, we're all in this together. And if we're going to create a world, which is deep in my heart, where all can thrive, we've got to understand this. So yeah, given that, it does seem like,
who do you think is behind
it's a strategy?
Yeah. Who do you think is behind that?
Well, I sort of stay away from that question. Because I don't know, do I think outer spatials are involved? Probably. I probably do. And it's not a hard one because we're affected. We're not just alone here. We are affected by so many factors. And one of the things I say in the book, we are everything. We're holographic. So those outer spatials are us too. And if we want to shift that, we have to get healthier and healthier internally. So that we're not vulnerable to being controlled or manipulated.
Yeah. Yeah. You write in the book about the 9D vertical axis, giving us a roadmap to navigating consciousness. Tell me a bit more about that, because we've jumped from 60 to 90. You know, what happens in between and what's there?
I'll let you know when I know. But of course, I have ideas.
Yeah.
Again, this was the vertical axis that Barbara Hand-Clow brought in. And it gives us 9 levels of consciousness that in human form we have easy access to. Well, easy is probably not quite a correct word. We have potential access to. There are multiple dimensions, I'm sure. I personally get a little like, go away when people start talking about the 17th and the 23rd. And, if you can handle the first 6, you're doing great. And it's good to know about the higher dimensions as well. And they're all interconnected and they all have different gifts. So the first dimension, which is the very heart of Mother Earth, is, it moves more slowly than the other dimensions. It's more dense, but it's not less intelligent. It's where gravity comes from, and it holds reflections of everything that goes on in the higher dimensions. Again, this is all interconnected. As you get into higher dimensions, we've talked about 5th and 6th. The 7th, and this I like to go from the 9th down, actually. The 9th is kind of a nirvana state where you lose your sense of personal boundary, not like people invading you, just that you become one with the cosmos, essentially. And then you get a little more individuated as you go down. So the 8th dimension is the blinding light of the divine, of consciousness, whatever words work for you. I also think that it is the beginning of 4 major archetypes that turn into the elements. That's just a flash I've had. I certainly can't back that up scientifically, but that's a sense I have. But still, that's such an expanded place. And one thing that Barbara does, which I absolutely love, is she talks about, it's very likely, and she backs it up with physics, that the speed of light is different from that. The first to third dimension has the speed of light, 200, I can't remember what it is per second, 200 something per second, 200 something thousand per second, I think. And that's what creates our material reality from the human eye at this point of development. 4 to 6 has a higher speed of light, and 7 to 9 has an even higher speed of light. So we're talking an evolutionary piece that we're just beginning to crawl to, if you will. So you have the light on the 8th dimension. Then that transduces down to sound. And again, higher dimensional sound. And it all starts, also you could say with 9, it starts with resonance, and then it keeps going down. What Emoto did with the water crystals very much shows then how you can take sound and it has in its resonance geometric patterns that pops us into 6D and so on and so on. So if that answers your question.
Yes. Yeah. You've been a psychotherapist for 50 years? How does your clinical background inform this multidimensional work?
Well, let's see. First of all, where I feel the best training I got as a psychotherapist was as an English major, because when you really understand literature and art forms, you understand the universals that connect us all and that the themes that people struggle with. And then I was in graduate school in the mid-70s. From 73 to 70, was a 2-year program, 75. So, that was a time of great opening collectively. And the graduate school I was in was very experiential. So that while we didn't talk overtly spiritually, people were very open to, and this is what I call transpersonal psychotherapy, where you're not just looking at the dysfunction and the pain, which of course is important, to how to heal the wounds, but also to understand that our soul has come in with very specific lessons. And as we move through those lessons, it opens us to these higher evolutionary experiences. So really, I kind of fell into that in graduate school in my mid-20s. So I was never trained in a classic clinical way. I was given good skills and a lot of internal work. So it was a time where I could really heal a lot of my wounding and understand how that worked for others. It was also a time of something called radical therapy, which looked at the social system to say, this is really messed up. And to stay sane in the social system is, and not put forth super dysfunctional patterns. You've got to break free. You've got to look at things from a new perspective. So that really gave me a fabulous background for where my work developed. And I just went from there. I didn't have the word at the time. It started happening for me. I was opening spiritually. So I didn't have the words transpersonal psychotherapy, but I was going through it and I was opening into it and I was beginning to put it into the therapy that I did. And then I found out, there was a whole school out on the West Coast, California, Northern California, of transpersonal psychotherapy. So then I had a name for it.
In the book, you reference Atlantis and Lemuria, ancient Egypt. Why are these three past civilizations so relevant to today?
Because they really operated on fifth and sixth dimensional consciousness. They weren't perfect, especially, Atlantis went through, from what we understand, 3 falls. The last one devastated it. It was gone. And it got out of balance, I think, before each fall. But they also had periods of very high consciousness, working together, being able to create a fabulous society where everybody could thrive. And they understood things that we're just beginning to reclaim. When I was in Egypt in 2005, I realized that, and it was before I was really, I loved the term multidimensional, but I didn't use it in the way that I've learned to do now. But I realized, both feeling my way and also I was on a shamanic journey there. So there was a lot of very cool exercises that we did, that this had been a very, very advanced civilization prior to what I call the dimensional descent. I don't know that it's a legend, it seems to be accurate, that Thoth came from Atlantis as Atlantis was falling, and over with the Emerald Tablets talk about this, over to Egypt, and there were others that went to different parts of the world. But the Egyptians, he brought this information in a way that to activate it in some way into the society that was there. And they found they had to be in balance. They understood the yin yang, inner male, inner female balance. The goddesses and the gods were all about being in balance. The temples that they created. I think that the temples, the ancient temples in Egypt, such as the Temple of Isis there, and I've forgotten some of the names. We went to so many, I was like, my left brain just checked out. So I don't have all the details, but there's some very elaborate temples where they could have housed universities. They could have housed sanctuaries for various sacred practices, healing centers. And I think that's a direct connection to the Pleiadians who on Alcyon. They have what's known as the Alcyon University. Quite literally, beings from all over the universe come to study there, to heal there, to share information there. So I think that, whether it was channeled or however they brought it in, we saw a much more authentic, well, let me try to find the right words here, the representation of what these higher frequencies that Atlantis and Lemuria and then ancient Egypt were able to pull from our star ancestors.
So when you say in the book that with Lemurian and Atlantean legacies, we can help heal trauma at a cellular level. And you're talking about that kind of information. How would we access that? How would we actually utilize it to heal at the cellular level?
Well, I think the first piece is to just know that it's possible, because as you open your belief system, the cells in our body actually respond to that. And I think that this is another piece about that star DNA. It gives us more access to it. As a psychotherapist, I take people through process. And so I don't see this as an instantaneous piece that's going on. I think at some point we probably will get there, but I think developmentally, where we are on a collective level, we go sort of little by little. So that, one of the meditations I have in the book is how to go in and find the trauma DNA in the cells, and the epigenetics, which is a fascinating, relatively new field, is beginning to understand that and explain things about that we have these genes from our ancestors that have great gifts, but also that hold ancestral trauma. And depending which genes are expressing depends basically on what we're dealing with. And so in this meditation, I take people literally into their cells to deactivate the trauma DNA. But that's just, how to say, that gives people a resource, an experience of it. It is highly unlikely at this stage of our development, we still don't have to work with the trauma, with other ways to work with the trauma. So it's not just like, oh man, I went in, I did that meditation, bam. That'd be great. But I don't believe we're there yet.
What other tools, aside from meditation, do you recommend?
Well, really finding the parts of ourselves that carry ancestral pain, that carry trauma from other lifetimes, that have wounded us in this lifetime, so that we see what's not working in our lives and go, wait a second, how can I shift this? And, there are many resources and ways to do that. There are many new, they're not new anymore, they're new to me because I studied so long ago, but, help with trauma, things like EMDR, and there's something called SE. There's more and more resources that people can help others with to move through the trauma, so that it's not impacting our lives anymore. Or again, it's a process. It's so that it's, I don't even want to say not impacting, but it has very little impact versus becoming paralyzed by it, or continuing to draw things that create more trauma to us.
So if we're on this path and we are, doing certain work in order to release the trauma and activate, these DNA strands, how would we recognize when we're slipping?
Oh,
It's not easy to know,
uh-huh.
where you're at all the time. We're slipping into patterns, and how would we then course correct that?
Well, one, I think it's just being aware, because when we're in those fifth and sixth dimensional frequencies, we feel really good. there's this lovely flow in our lives. That doesn't mean there's not a challenge, but the challenges don't feel insurmountable. And maybe even we bring this will be fun. Let's see how I can work through this to it. When our mood lowers, I mean, in some ways it is simple. It's like if we don't feel good, if we feel cranky, then that's the time to go, okay, so what's going on here? And a really simple technique is to go into the heart and really breathe a lot of loving energy, divine energy, energy from our own hearts, to feel the heart expand. And as we do that, it actually shifts the frequency, which gives us a higher perspective. The other piece that I think is so important is to understand how our emotions, specific emotions, need to be honored, is what I call it. So that, if we feel angry about something, and anger is a natural response, if we feel violated, and that can be relative. I know I worked with a bunch of, when my oldest daughter was 5, she was at a lovely little Montessori school. And at the time we didn't have much money, but I worked out a deal where I could trade a little bit by working with the kids. And I did a feelings class. And these kids were all from families. I'm not saying there was no abuse, but the likelihood was low. These were families that really, were willing to pocket out money so that their kids could have a really loving experience. Those kids were still angry. But they'd be angry about things like, I didn't get that second ice cream.
Yeah.
Versus I'm getting hurt. It's so everybody has these feelings. And in our culture, we've been made to squish them down, and finding ways of how to honor those feelings so that we get to release the energy in a non-harmful way is essential, I think, in this process. And that's, because I am a psychotherapist, that's my particular strand, if you will, of work to bring forward, is that we really need to tune into what we're feeling and how to begin to release those energies so we can be free. Because truly what health is, and vibrancy and higher frequency, which we get to naturally, I think, at that point, is just clearing all of the crap that we've had from the culture, from other lifetimes, from our families, from our schools, from our, religious institutions, on and on and on.
So what you're saying is it's not, something we've got to cultivate because it's already there. What we've got to do is excavate, get rid of all the stuff that's sitting on the top of it.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great term. Exactly.
Yeah. So you explore how the light language of the sixth dimension is embedded in sacred geometry and sound, and it can help us, connect to the divine mind. We've heard over the last decades or more, so many people beginning to discover and utilize light language. And do you think that's something that becomes available to all of us as we begin to progress?
Oh, I do. It's becoming more, people didn't even know about this, right? So it's like the fact that we're talking about it, I'm sure you've talked about it with a lot of other guests, and, interviewers and teachers around the world are talking about this more and more. So we're understanding that really what sacred geometry is, which is very much embedded in the sixth dimension. That's where we access it. And I'm a novice here in many ways. I had to study it as I was writing the book, and had a lovely experience because I found a sacred geometry teacher that taught by having us draw the sacred geometry patterns and see how we connected to it. And there was also a lovely thing on Gaia about sacred geometry and how it connects us to divine mind. So, we're in this perceptual expansion. And as we do that, we're finding interconnections with not just all of life on this planet, but interconnections with all, how can I say that? Well, with all levels of consciousness, and sacred geometry connects us that way. In terms of actual light language, and I'll tell you, it's very interesting because suddenly I find myself like I'm walking, and all of a sudden I'm like talking out loud because I live in the mountains. There's no one around. This light language, I'm like, okay. Now I've had flashes of that before, which I speak of in the book, but it's at this stage of my development, I don't have a translation for it. It's very much energetic. It's energy, and it transmits through energy. And there's something in the words and the cadences. And people are opening up like this. So, it's part of the great mystery in a way.
You recommend, that we focus on energizing utopian rather than dystopian visions. Challenging, the current climate today, I mean, it is just so heavy in trying to keep people, looking at a 3D level. Number one, I think I know why it's vital. I mean, intention is intention is intention, and visualizations are a great way of expressing intention. But, how do we find, when people are struggling in the 3D Maya, how do they find the wherewithal to hold that vision, that utopian vision?
Well, again, we're not perfect. So, we're being bombarded with insanity. It's been insane for thousands of years, but now we are getting really bombarded. So it's very challenging. And to understand how reality is created, which is how it goes through from the sixth dimension, if we focus on how bad it is, we feed it. So it's not to ignore it, and I think that, conscious people, I imagine around the planet right now, are all struggling with, okay, so how do we take some kind of stand that we have to be loving and caring and stop these inhumane practices and wars? These are insane. And simultaneously not get stuck in that energy, not focus on that energy. It's a very challenging dance. And again, we're not going to do it perfectly. However, when we understand that, if we start really focusing on how bad everything is, it really does just feed it. Whereas if we focus on, okay, our potential, we have this potential to step out of this paradigm, which is happening anyway. It's not making the news, but of course we know that, right? All the people you interview and know, but they're amazing people all over the globe that are and just average people that are waking up. So there is a whole other reality already kind of stepping into place. We'll begin to focus on that. Focus on, if, this is a John Lennon thing, right? His imagine. So what excites you? Do you care about the environment? How can we shift environmentally? Then go for your area of interest. Do you care about educating the children? Do you care about healthcare? That kind of thing. To really get together as groups and brainstorm. What do we want to create?
Yeah. It is nice. I must admit, I do it sometimes, just give myself some time out and I just make up stories, and visualize certain wonderful things happening just because, why not? But yeah, if we were all to, regardless of, just to entertain ourselves, even if only to entertain ourselves. Yeah.
But it's such positive entertainment. I mean, because even though it's fun, doesn't mean it's not effective.
Yeah.
Just the fact you're creating these stories, they go into the sixth dimension. Yeah. And maybe somebody on the other island, right? A bunch of humans are like, this story just came to me. and it gets energized. So these things are important. The old paradigm says we have to suffer. And again, that's what pulls all that energy down and holds us hostage, kind of.
Yeah.
So, yes, have fun, have humor, play, make up those stories. I think that's a fabulous tool, honestly.
Well, it's no different than immersing in a really entertaining movie. You're in fiction land and anything can happen.
However, I would say the difference is, movies can be very effective when you see something uplifting, and I wish there were more of those out in the world. Collectively, it impacts so many people. However, when you're making up those beautiful stories, there's a focus to them that also is effective. And, not to be diminished, I guess is what I'd like to say about that.
Yeah. Tell me about the car body. What do you understand about the car body?
Okay. So, and this is from ancient Egypt, which probably is from star consciousness and Atlantis and Lemuria. And who knows? I think there probably were other civilizations that were smaller, so we don't have much information about. Certainly, a lot of the indigenous cultures have stories that suggest this, and those who have the few cultures that haven't been brutalized and thrown into this paradigm were, I think, able to keep a lot of these higher frequencies. Okay. Sorry, that distracted me.
The car.
Oh, the Ka body. All right. So the Egyptians, as I understand it, the Ka is our energetic soul configuration. There are all these beautiful geometric configurations in the quantum field or the sixth dimension, as I see it. And everything has a geometric configuration. So do we. Our souls have a particular geometric configuration. And that's our pure soul before all that stuff gets laid on it. So we exist in that pure form in the sixth dimensional frequencies. As we begin to connect with our Ka and bring it more in, because most people in our culture have been disconnected from that, really their soul essence. We have more energy. We have more consciousness. We are working on authentically, bringing ourselves and all around us into these higher frequencies. And so, for me, I get sort of a visual when I think about my own Ka body. When I feel in super alignment, everything's just lining up. I feel like my Ka is more fully into my third dimensional self. When I feel cranky, it hit the road and I need to call it back.
So, would you rather that people understand their Ka body first or their star DNA? Is there a difference here? Is there some kind of sequence to our understanding?
Well, I've never pondered that, Sandie. I think it's an interesting question. And it may be very individual. Like, I loved the star DNA piece before the Ka experience because it gave me I like to work from a larger perspective and then bring it on down. But other people equally valuably work from the ground up, kind of. So perhaps finding their Ka and beginning to understand how that interconnects with everybody else's Ka and star consciousness, etc., is also an important path. It really, I think that there are going to be a lot of different paths leading to the same place.
So, with regard to Atlantis and Lemuria, what is something that was very prevalent in their times that could be really helpful to us now?
Good question. Let me take a minute on that, because that's really important.
Because it must be coming back for many reasons, that everybody's talking about it. People are having kind of, oh my God, I've had this flashback about my time in Atlantis, more people are having recall.
Right, which is exciting. I mean, the simple answer, which I think is an important answer, is that they're models of how we can create a loving, harmonious, peaceful, just society that's sacred, that's based on sacred principles and higher consciousness. So that's probably the most important. And I think, things like energy production, there are technologies, and I think that's even more Atlantis than Lemuria. Lemuria, from my understanding at this stage, was much more feminine and inorganic. And so while they had, comfortable situation for everybody, they didn't have to have high tech. Atlantis is more masculine, and they had some incredible technology, which I believe we're tapping into more and more. But then, of course, we have to go back to the heart of how are we going to use this technology. And maybe that's part of what brought Atlantis down. Some of the people were able to use it in a, loving, conscious way, and other people misused it.
Yeah. If you were to project forward 100 years, how would you think people will look back at this moment in history? Collapse or initiation?
Well, my best story, okay, is they went, whoa, those people had a lot of challenges, and they were able to, move through them and keep their vision and connect with each other and create this powerful, powerful field that brings forth a planet that's thriving. And that's, certainly what I would love to see 100 years from now, looking back at we're the forerunners, we're the pioneers, and we created a foundation for things to really change and support the well-being of all.
What do you want people to take away from your book? If they can only take away one or two things, what's the most important?
That we create our reality, and that we need to take responsibility for it, and that the reason we have these negative realities is that we've done it unconsciously. And as we become more conscious and we heal our old wounds, then we can consciously create something that serves everyone. And I think that would probably be the bottom line.
Responsibility, then,
Yes, in a self-loving way. All right. It's not like, oh God, I better do it, or, not in a burdened way, but in a way like, I have this power. I have these abilities. And you do, and you do, and you do. So how can we utilize them to create our personal reality and our collective reality?
So you wrote a book about 5-dimensional consciousness and 6-dimensional consciousness. Well, what are you working on now, or what are you planning to write next?
Well, what I'm working on now, since the 60 Ascension Journey is just being released, is helping it get out into the world. I don't know what's next. My typical process has been, I'm done. And then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm writing another book. So the only thing that has come just a little bit is how so much of what we see manifested now is a distortion of love energy. And, is that a book? I don't know. But that's the only thing that's kind of flipped through. And the reality is I'm going to be 80 next year. And even though, obviously I'm in good shape, and it's like, well, how long am I going to do this? I don't know. How long am I going to be on the planet? Right?
There's been quite a bit of research lately saying, we can all live to 130.
Yes. And do, and be vibrant. And of course that would be lovely. So that's where I'm just staying open. Let's see what happens. And also,
Well,
I think, we have a shelf life in the sense that we're here to carry out what our missions are.
mm,
And when we fulfilled them, we head out. The other piece is that sometimes, and I don't feel this on a personal level, but I know, some very evolved people that have died fairly young, that they needed to be available in other places, that their mission became larger or different that couldn't be carried out in the bodies. I don't know.
mm. Of everything, we know what's going on in the world. No point talking about it anymore. Everybody's aware of it. What is exciting you the most about what is emerging now? AI, some other kind of technology, all the information about sound and frequency. What are you most fascinated by?
Well, there's a lot to be fascinated by. And as you know, I've just opened up to how AI can be used in a loving, positive, conscious way versus, yes, one has to be careful. But so that is a bit of interest now, although I got real interested and then other things have come sort of in. Um, Healing techniques. How do we keep releasing all that old trauma so our souls can shine brighter and brighter? I suppose just basically that excites me. And what I see, like when I teach classes, my classes are very process oriented. So I do a little teaching, but mainly I have people go in, experience things and share with each other. And they love it. For people to be able to connect in this way with people whose hearts and minds are leading them to this evolution. That excites me.
You have a shamanic multidimensional mystery school.
Yes.
Tell me just a little bit about that before we close.
Well, I had gone through, Linda Starwolf's my friend and neighbor. She's actually my next door neighbor. And Starwolf did a mystery school. And I loved the mystery, right? It's such a great word. So I took her mystery school. And it was a 4-part. And the first, I don't know, in about 20 minutes of being in there, I'm like, oh, I have to do a multidimensional mystery school. It just kind of came to me. And I thought, okay, and I'm not doing it alone. Dear friend and colleague of mine, Carly Mattermore, who's back in Springfield, Illinois, where I had been for 40 some years, was also taking the mystery school. So not in the same group I was in. So I called Carly and I said, let's start a mystery school. And she does more of the shamanic pieces. She's traveled like all over the world with white lions and the gorillas and the whales. And, that's her gift. So she and I have created, and it's a great process. But I was not sure lately. I mean, we were going to do another circle. We've done 4 circles. The last 2 were after COVID hit. So the last 2 have been online. So we keep talking about doing another one, but I've been a little hesitant because I have to work so hard. And right now I'm working hard on this other stuff. But it's a fabulous process. We go through there are 4 segments. We go through an element per segment. And again, do a lot of, we do our teaching. I teach the multidimensional piece. Carly teaches the shamanic, but we merge them. And then we have people go into a breath work where they get their own wisdom to come forth and connect with each other after the breath work. So, that's sort of basically it. And what we've done afterwards with our graduates, which I love because it's only a day and a half, not even a half, is advanced mystery school. So as new ideas are coming to me and new ideas are coming to Carly, we'll throw out hey, let's do an advanced. Mm-hmm. And if you're a graduate, you can do them. So I don't know if that gave you a lot of detail, but there it is.
Judith Corvin-Blackburn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sandie. It's lovely to connect with you.
You too. So every age of crisis tempts us to believe that collapse is the final chapter. But what if it's the prologue? Judith Corvin-Blackburn's vision of the 6th dimensional human suggests that we're not here to repeat history, but we're here to write a new one. In reminding us that our DNA is more than biology, it's a cosmic archive of who we are and who we can become, she invites us to step beyond fear and limitation, to remember that we're designed not just to survive, but to create. So consider this. If the codes of the future are already inside you, the question isn't whether humanity will evolve. It's whether you will choose to live as the new human now. The 60 Ascension Journey, Activating the Light Codes in Our 12-Strand DNA, is published by Inner Traditions Bear and Company. For more information on Judith Corvin-Blackburn's books, online classes, videos, and global shamanic multidimensional mystery school, you can visit empoweringthespirit.com. empoweringthespirit.com. And if you're looking for powerful meditations to access your highest soul wisdom, check out her YouTube channel, Wisdom Within Us. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back with another episode of Between Realms and Reason next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me. And thank you again to Judith Corvin-Blackburn.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.